Welcome to Whatcha Makin, a podcast about sharing ideas, discussing the business of making, and connecting with the maker community. Your hosts are Alex Adams, an engineer turned furniture maker of Type A Furniture, and an alien pretending to be a DIY craftsman, Alex Duffey of Duffey Woodcraft. This is Whatcha Makin.
Hello, makers, and welcome to Whatcha Makin, a podcast where we talk all about our current projects, spotlight the makers throughout the community, and remind you that Scotland's national animal is the unicorn. In this week's main topic, we're talking about carving, from traditional to power carving. I'm Alex Duffey, and you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Duffey Woodcraft, and as an instructor over at CNC With Me.
And I'm Alex Adams, and I am at Type A Furniture, which you can find me on that handle on Instagram. And I don't really have any special facts queued up, but we do have a Patreon, and that's at patreon.com/whatchamakinshow, where you can get those lovely stickers that Mr. Duffey is holding up to the screen. And I would like to remind you that it only takes $5 to become a patron. And there's still one slot left for that special gift that Mr. Duffey has promised. So get on it and be that last one.
And it's good. There are only going to be 5 of them, and I'm hand baking them. They're special gifts. It's a little cue that you're going to get something made by me. So sign up right away.
What you doing?
What you doing?
You can start.
I can start? Okay.
Yes.
And I have the wrong show notes open. That was my fault. I'm sitting here going, where are my show notes? Alex. All right.
That just means it's a rerun, right?
Yeah, it's a rerun. All right. So this week, I have been making, I've talked about the last couple of weeks. All I've been doing is the AWFS Fair gifts that they hired me to do. Thank you gifts for the speakers and for the judges. So I have 70 gift bags that I'm finishing. Each gift bag has 3 different products in it, possibly 4 if I have enough time, that I might throw a special one in there that they didn't ask for. So I have pretty much all of the products done. The wooden notebooks, the whiskey smokers, bottle openers. Bottle openers just need finish, and then I can put the hardware on, screw in the hardware, and then they're finished. I have bookmarks that just need lasers and then finish. And then I hand sanded 386 coasters today, which sucks.
Now, when you say hand sanded, are you talking like piece of sandpaper in the hand or a hand sander?
A piece of paper. Well, one of the sanding blocks.
Okay, so the sanding block.
Yeah, because I've already sanded. So how I do my coasters is once I cut them to the 1/4-inch material. So I basically resaw 3/4-inch material, sand it down to or run it through the planer, get it down to final size. I sand everything with an orbital sander, and then I chop up the strips, because I usually do them in 20-inch strips of wood. And I chop them up to final dimensions so that the squares are done. But because, then you've chopped that up, you have the rough edges. And so I put those on a belt sander to flatten the edges, make sure they're nice and tight. But now you have some super sharp corners. And so then I take that sanding block and I basically break the edges on every corner and side of the coasters. So that's
now,
all
is that one of those
hand.
sanding block sponges, or just like one of those ones that like clips to a piece of plastic?
It's like the one that's molded to the shape of your hand, and then you just have a Velcro of like a normal round 5-inch orbital sander piece of sandpaper that Velcros to it around it.
Oh, is that the like the Rockler one, or?
There's a whole bunch of different brands that do it, but same thing. Yeah, gotcha. But that way it almost feels like you're holding a mouse in your hand. It looks almost like the same design, but a little bit bigger, and then it wraps around, and so you just sit there and you sand all the edges.
Yeah, because I use when I'm doing stuff like that, I typically use it's called the Preppin' Weapon, the Time Shaver Preppin' Weapon. It's a little bit longer. I think it's about like 8 or 9 inches long, and I think about like 3 inches wide, and it's got I think it's like a 1/4-inch foam on there. Mark Spagnolo at the Wood Whisperer, he uses them
I
all
know
the time, and I started using them, and I found that those are another good option as well.
Yeah,
for that kind of
it's
stuff.
very similar to that, except it doesn't do that clip. It just uses Velcro. So it basically uses the same hook and loop Velcro that you use with your orbital sander.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
But same idea.
Yeah, and it just kind of depends on your use case of what actually works, because that bigger profile, the one that I use with that prep and weapon, it doesn't necessarily work for like small inside corners and stuff like that. So it just kind of
Right.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on what you actually need. But that's one thing that I'll use to like break edges, just because the handle is such more. That's a great term. So much better ergonomically, much gooder.
Much
Why
better.
use many
Much
word
more
when
good.
few word do trick?
Yeah. So so my arm, like my left arm, is just dead because I'm a lefty, and so that's where most of my sanding is done on my hand. So it sucks today.
You're not an amphibious sander.
An amphibious? No, I'm not.
It's a callback to an article where they called a baseball pitcher amphibious instead of ambidextrous or
ambidextrous.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'm making, I have a commission to do 3 funeral boxes, and I am doing something new on my CNC for this that I've never done, which is I'm using a 1/2 inch, a full 1 inch diameter, 1/2 inch radius, 90-degree bit. So it's a big bit. So that way I can, in the 1/2 inch material that I'm using for these boxes, I can use that 90-degree bit to do a profile line. So it's basically creating that miter cut for me. So I can then just fold up the box off the CNC to do that nice 45-degree angle miter corner.
So it's a V bit, or no, it's not rounded over. It's for like a specific thickness material, is what you said.
Right. So
for some reason in my head, I immediately went to like round over radius is what I was thinking.
No, yeah. So I'm using 1/2 inch material, and because of that, I can't use my standard 1/4 inch 90-degree bit because that can only do a 1/4 inch. So I have to do the full 1/2 inch radius or a full 1 inch diameter bit. So it's a big honking bit, but then I just run it on a profile cut on the CNC, and that cuts out. It basically makes it so I'm doing perfect miters on the corners of these box sides every single time. So
gotcha. Yeah, I was when you said radius, I was not thinking about width of the bit. I was thinking the shape of the bits. That's where I got hung up. Yeah.
So it's something new for me. I've never done boxes this way, and traditionally boxes on the CNC aren't done this way. You use a end mill bit, and you basically cut out the corners by doing these little extra like tabs off the corner, so you still get a square corner instead of a rounded one when the bit goes around the edge. But when you do that, the only way to do it then is to do butt joints when you're putting the box together, or box joints, or whatever that's a butt joint, right? Where you just put the 2 ends together.
I think so.
Yeah. Anyways, but I really love the look of miter joints, but I hate doing them on the table saw because the table saw scares me because I have a horrible table saw. Hey, Harvey, if you're listening. But
that means you want a Harvey, not that you're knocking on Harvey, right?
No, I really want a Harvey. Yes,
exactly. Just clarify.
I think they're a phenomenal brand. No, I have an old Delta saw that's from the 70s, and it's great. It doesn't have a riving knife. It has no safety gears whatsoever of anything, and it sounds like a jet engine every time I turn it on. So it kind of terrifies me in a small shop. But yeah, so I wanted to figure out a way to do miter cuts on my CNC, and so this is a whole new thing for me. So I'm actually recording a YouTube video for it as well. So that'll be out later in July, which I'll looking forward to sharing that journey with, because it's been interesting.
Now, are those funeral boxes, are those technically different than urns, or is that the same thing?
It's basically the same thing, but urns traditionally are turned on a lathe, and they're round. They're basically vases with sealed lids, right?
Okay.
is what an urn is. But so technically, it does the same thing as an urn, but is a funeral. It's a box, so they call it a funeral box.
Gotcha. Okay.
And basically they got a big box for their dad, but they wanted to split some of the ashes for the 3 kids. So I'm making the 3 boxes for the kids.
Okay. Gotcha.
And they're having me carve a cardinal, because their mom loved cardinals, on the top of the box, and then fill it with red epoxy. So it'll look really nice when it's done.
So all three of those are going to look the same then?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's kind of the whole point of why I'm doing on the CNC too, because they'll be exactly the same, other than the natural wood look. But they're all made from cherry, and they'll all look exactly the same, so that each kid has the same thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but that's what I've been working on. What have you been working on?
I've been doing just a few odds and ends things right now. I did do a laser engraving on a cutting board where it was the address again, so I did another one of those for the realtor colleague.
Nice.
And then I been getting a little bit better at getting into a rhythm of 3D prints and kind of getting into the workflow of that. So we've rearranged the 3D print room a little bit and organized things better. I did actually put up a bunch of racks for the filament to have on the sides of the wall, so that's a lot easier, because before it was just rolls of filament on the ground in Ziploc bags, so they weren't very easily organized and accessible, and it kind of got in the way and made it difficult to walk around in the room. So I finally took some 1/2-inch PVC, and then I just 3D printed brackets for that to get those up against the wall, and that's been a lot easier to get filament swapped out for whatever it is I need. And then with my son, he's been the primary one removing the supports off of some of the prints, because some of the articulated fidgets are, some of them you can print in place, but the more that you put on a plate, the more you're likely to have an error, so it's just better to put the supports on there so that you have fewer errors. And so we've just been planning on removing support. So he's kind of been doing that in the morning, and then sometime in the evening after he gets back from his summer camp. And then I've also been having him do the keychains, getting those actually put onto the keychain itself. I'm still doing the earrings because those ones need a little bit more finesse to get on. Because the loop on those on the 3D print is so small, he has trouble snapping those off. So I've been kind of the one primarily doing the earrings, putting on the hardware to actually attach the earring itself, because it's not actually built into the 3D print itself. And then I've been doing a little bit of cleaning of the wood shop, and I think I'm probably going to put up some more shelves to keep things a little bit more organized, especially in the garage space, which is the space that I'm recording in right now. So I'm trying to get, as we've had reorganization in the house, things have gotten redistributed. There's a random toilet in the basement that's just sitting there because we replaced the toilet that was in the bathroom. It was functioning perfectly fine because my wife wanted a different toilet that's easier to clean, which ended up being an entire bathroom. I don't want to say full bathroom remodel, but the flooring got replaced in it, the subflooring. Mm-hmm. Which that was a birthday present from her mom, so that translates to the father-in-law doing that work. So I just kind of stepped away when they did it. I was like, that's part of the birthday present. I'm just gonna be over here, just watching.
Do not include me.
Exactly, because it's I didn't want to do it, and it's one of those things where I can do it, but I just didn't have the head space to like dive into another project like that. Because she's a lot more gung-ho about doing home projects, except for I try to like keep things on a more realistic schedule where it's like, yeah, we can do these 3 or 4 house projects, but it's going to take me like 3 times as long as what you want it to be done by. So I'm just trying to not shoot myself in the foot with extra projects, because we've already got our backyard and garden space as like an in-progress project that still needs to get finished, and that one's a pretty big undertaking as well. So that's me getting off on a tangent a little bit about other stuff around the house that's been going on, but yeah, that's a lot of reorganization and trying to make things a little bit more efficient. So that's my way of saying that I've been procrastinating some other projects. So, because it's really easy to hit print on a 3D print and modify some files and things. I did actually, yeah, I'll save it for the Whatcha Breakin segment. Or should I just transition into that?
Fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it!
Okay, so I'll just transition to that. So, the one thing that I've been trying to do with the 3D print files is there was one person, he's bought a bunch of different car-related keychains, and he wanted a keychain of, it was a specific car show. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it's not a very like well-known one, and so there was not a readily available file for that. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole of trying to convert the logo into an extruded 3D print that I could then use as a keychain. So that's kind of still an ongoing thing where, you know, you start with a JPEG and then you've got to convert it to an SVG, and then I'm supposedly supposed to convert it to a DXF and then go to 3MF or something like that. This is where my skill set this is like one step before where my skill set actually comes into play, because I'm more accustomed to 3D modeling stuff. I'm not as accustomed to converting and working with like SVGs and those types of files. So it's a little bit of a newer space for me, because I don't use Adobe, whatever the different Adobe software is that does a lot of this stuff. I'm not very well versed into it, so it's a little bit of a newer space for me. So I'm still working on trying to do that. So it's not like I technically broke anything, but maybe the file was broken when I tried to get it into a DXF and it just ended up weird. So I guess that's kind of my way of saying that it was kind of broken. But
and I know we transitioned, but something you have been making, but not really making, but you were, we should say you were also on a podcast this weekend, not this podcast.
That is true. I was a guest on Sawdust Talk this week. So we, a good portion of it we talked about going through and doing the church pews, and a little bit on 3D printing. But yeah, I was on that one, so that one's available out now, so you can get that episode of Sawdust Talk and listen to it. I think is it episode 156, 126? I don't know which one it is.
Something like that, but it was you, TJ, and Jeff from Maker's Way. Cause,
that is correct. Yes, it was Suspenseful Music. Episode 162. There was a 6 in there.
Yeah, there you go.
So I was close.
Yeah, Jesse is in Costa Rica, which I have to say I'm a little jealous. I want to go back to Costa Rica.
Yeah, when do we start getting trips to Costa Rica for this podcast?
Sign up for Patreon now, please.
Seamless transition.
Right.
We wouldn't use Patreon money for that. It'd be to go to woodworking shows, if anything.
And buying gifts to give back to our patrons.
Right, yeah. That's part of it, is we always make sure to have gifts for each tier. And all the software and other stuff to run the show itself. But anyway, back to stuff that I've been breaking. So I think I mentioned 2 or 3 weeks back I had a nozzle on the P1S 3D printer that instead of fixing it, I just swapped on a new one. And I was able to actually figure out that it was just the filament that kind of got jammed in there. And it turns out it's a pretty easy fix. All you got to do is take a hex wrench that's small enough, heat it up with a torch, and then just press it in there so it heats up the filament. And then as it cools off, you can then pull out that filament that has been stuck in there, and then it'll start working again. Sometimes it takes a little bit of like heating up the hot end itself to make sure that you can actually pull the hex wrench out and get enough of that material out of there. So I was able to get that one hot end back and actually start using it. And I think part of it is because, or part of the reason why it has that issue is it actually slices the filament itself like flush with that hot end nozzle. So it makes it very difficult to grab or extract that piece if it is flared out or whatever. So what happens is the other filament tries to get forced in there, and then as the gears turn that push the filament in, it basically starts rubbing on the filament, and then it like pulls enough of it forward and deforms it that it can't physically pull the filament back out because it's kind of got it. It's moving. It's pushing towards the nozzle, and so that big chunk goes on the other side. So you've got to disassemble the whole thing to get that off, and then you've got to get the filament out of the hot end itself that's actually blocking the filament from going in. Which it seems like, from what I've gathered from using the A1 3D printer, that it cuts high enough that it leaves like, I don't think it's quite a half inch of material, but it leaves you a little bit more to work with, so it's easier to handle that issue when it does arise. So the A1 being the newer of those two models, I think it's benefited from them understanding how that one fails, and so it makes it that much more bulletproof when it does run. Because I have so many fewer problems with the A1 than I do with the P1S, but I've gotten much more accustomed to the P1S when I've disassembled the whole extrusion head, so now I'm pretty quick at being able to take it apart, clean it, and put it back together when I need to. So that's helped, at least, so I can troubleshoot that a lot better. So that's what I had for the 3D printing side, and then for the laser, I did have an issue with the laser that I ran into, where it started the lasering file, or it started lasering, but after doing, I don't want to say a pass, because that implies that it does the entire image. After it lasers a couple of lines, it like errored out, and then the laser just moved through the rest of the length of the bed, and then kept on beeping at me. And it was flashing the error that it normally would give for when the shield comes off with that sensor, because if you recall, I disconnected that sensor because I was having issues with it, and I shorted it. So I was like, that's weird that I shorted it, so it shouldn't be giving me this error message. So I did a little bit of troubleshooting. I actually soldered that together so that I knew it was secure, instead of the alligator clip that I just clipped on before. So instead of it just being like mechanical, now it is fused together. And I was still having that issue, and I was thinking, all right, the laser is starting and it's turning on. I had done the framing earlier where it was only set at like 1 or 2% power, and it was going around framing and the laser stayed on. So I was like, okay, I think I had heard from a couple of places that sometimes backing off of the laser from 100% down to like 95 or 90% sometimes help, because when you go at the max power, sometimes things can be a little bit finicky. So I backed it off to 90%, and it started lasering again, and it started doing just fine. So I did laser the cutting board that I had gotten for that realtor colleague, because that's what I needed this project working for. But it was odd because I had done those entire images at 100% where I had done the line drawings of the houses, and I never had an issue, and that was like a week ago. So I'm wondering if it's just the thickness of the text, the laser is on a little bit longer, and it needed power longer, and something dipped somewhere in the circuitry. So
Could be a heat problem too. I mean, lasers, you're right. They're not recommended to run at 100%. Usually, you shouldn't run them over 95%. So
yeah, so I backed it off for that reason, and I think I need to slow down the laser speed to essentially simulate running at 100%, so then it runs slow enough that it's burning at 90%, just a little bit longer to get the same effect, if you will. Because I didn't get as much of a dark color on it, because there was a little bit of sapwood on this cutting board, and it kind of kept the same color as that. So I don't want to say it faded into the color of that sapwood a little bit, because there wasn't as much of that distinguishment. But I would have liked to have probably done another pass on that, but I had taken the board off already, and I hadn't seen that until I'd taken the board off. I was like, ah, crap, I can't go back and laser this back down again, because since I had started that first time on the laser where it only went back and forth like a couple of times, I already had to resand it down again to get those laser marks out. So I had already done that on that particular board. So it's like, I don't want to do this again, and it was starting to get later in the evening, so I was like, we'll just go with this, it'll be fine. It's still readable. It's just not quite as crisp as I would want it to be. So I ended up getting that stuff fixed. So that's some of the stuff that I had to fix this week.
nice. Well, my week was, again, I was making all those coasters and stuff, and one of the first problems I ran into was I had a Taco Bell brown pants moment. And that moment is I was doing some reselling of some coasters, and a gun went off in my shop, and the bandsaw blade snapped right in front of my face. It was gloriously a fun moment. And by fun, I mean terrifying, and thank you, Taco Bell, for that moment.
What size was that blade? Is it like
a 1/2 inch?
Okay, yeah, so that's a pretty good size bandsaw blade.
Yeah, I've had it on for a while. I knew it was getting a little dull and it needed to get changed, but I was like, I'll just keep pushing it until it comes, until I am noticing I can't really cut or anymore or anything like that. And I started noticing like 2 cuts before this happened. The thump 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 noise that you get when you know that your blade is pretty much done. And I was like, all right, I had 5 at that point. I had 5 more boards to saw, and I was like, you know what? I just want to do these 5 boards, and got to almost through the second one. And as soon as it was like halfway into that cut, it just snapped. And it was like I said, it's like a gunshot going off in the garage, which was terrifying. But I knew it was coming, so I was kind of prepared for it at least. But it wasn't great.
Did it snap right on the weld?
No, actually, that was what surprised me. It didn't snap on the weld.
Yeah, the bandsaw blade that I had snap a few months ago, it didn't snap on the weld either, which was also surprising to me. So because typically that's the spot that's gonna fail.
Yeah, it was definitely a stress fracture that did it, because it was a jagged cut too. It wasn't like a single or clean line. It was definitely jagged. So I think there was a stress fracture in the steel. So
yeah, because I want to say that in mine, I can't remember if the tooth ahead of it was broken or if that particular tooth was dull, but it made sense that it broke there because of like the added stress. Because if you if you're missing a couple of teeth, or that particular tooth is like sticking out further and it's dull, it's taking the brunt of that force, because like if you've got hundreds of teeth on there, but it's the first one to touch the wood because the bandsaw is going around so quickly, that's the one taking the force, and it's like it's pressing on that spot of the blade continuously. Now, did that ruin the workpiece?
No, luckily it didn't. I think it broke in the workpiece, and it immediately just pulled right out, and then it started shooting off to the side when it was still running around. So it didn't ruin the piece at all, which was great. So I was able to change the blade, put that piece, finish the cut. I mean, there was a little bit of extra taken out, but I needed to sand that down or plane that down anyway, because I was cutting 3/4 inch material, and the final thickness was a quarter of an inch. So I have extra thickness to play with. So I put on I had a 1/2 inch blade on there, and then I put on a 1/3 inch because I didn't have a replacement 1/2 inch. And man, it was night and day. It was like, oh yeah, I could tell how dull that blade was, because this one was just screaming through, ripping through the wood, like cutting like butter. No, working for it to cut through it. So yeah, it was great. But so I finished all that up. But yeah, that moment when it breaks, man, it is definitely a heartbeat skipper. So now I need to order another blade. But that happens.
Shut up and take my money.
So moving on to selling. So this week I haven't had a market, haven't done any physical sales this week. My Etsy store, like we talked about in the last episode, has continued to do really well this week. The digital files are selling at a lot higher rate this month than they normally do. So again, I think people are off for the summer. They're doing their summer projects. Maybe they're starting to buy files to test to see if they're going to make stuff for the holidays or not. But a lot of my sales, and surprisingly, a bunch of my Christmas tree stuff has sold, which is weird because that's usually later in the season. So maybe Etsy started pushing that for some reason, but I've made quite a few of the sales on those. So yeah, it's been weird.
I can't remember. Did you say that you had any other themed files other than Christmas? Like, do you have fall stuff?
No, I don't have any. No, I do have. I have some pumpkin stuff up, which I think I've only ever sold 2 of that file. Which, it was a file I did once for a video, and I was just like, this is kind of fun. I'll throw it up on Etsy if anybody wants to buy it. And I've sold it twice. I don't really like the tree. It's a tray, pumpkin tray project. I don't actually even like the project, but I have it up there in case somebody else does. I'm just not a big tray person. I never have been. So I know a lot of people love trays and love making trays and selling them. I don't know. I don't see the point. I use the counter. I don't put things on trays, I guess.
Yeah, one that always surprised me was the little single pen tray. That's the one that kind of surprises me the most of something that actually does sell. And I think that's...
For me, it's the nightstand docking station thing. I don't keep anything other than my cup of water on my nightstand and my cell phone charger, and that's it. I don't have... My watch doesn't go there. I don't need spots for coins or other things I take out of my pocket. All that's downstairs where my wallet goes and everything. So it is very, to me, some of that stuff is very interesting because it's just not part of my workflow. So I don't see how those products sell, and because I wouldn't buy them.
Yeah, because I've always looked at some of the ones where it's the it's like the triple charging station where it charges your phone, your smartwatch, and then your earbuds case all in one. Which those ones have they've intrigued me, but it's I'm fine with my charging because I just have a couple of wireless pads next to my bed that I throw my stuff onto and call it good. Well, so that's what I use.
I am an Android user, so I have the Pixel earbuds, and this thing holds a charge for all week. even the amount of time I use my headphones. So like I only have to charge it once a week. So it's not like I'm charging it every night on my nightstand. When I charge it, I usually, because it uses the same USB-C as my laptop, I just unplug my laptop for an hour, charge this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a high-speed charger, and then call it good. So
yeah, mine's just out of habit throwing the headphones case on there as a nightly thing, because it would probably go, because I use my headphones quite a bit during the day, so I'd probably get, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 days out of it if I didn't charge it, but I just like having things topped off. So I tend to be more prepared on that side of things. I'm not the kind of person who like walks around with a phone at like 6% or something like that. I've got numerous power banks that I carry with me if I actually need extra power during the day. So I look forward to the day where my earbuds case is no longer Lightning but is USB-C, because I got the like generation before they, like, it's the same generation but they updated it to have the USB-C, so I'm waiting until they actually upgrade the AirPods Pro to actually get the next pair, because it might have been like I put them through the ringer, like they're pretty worn, like they still function just fine, they've shown their age. So I'd rather have a newer one sooner rather than later when I'm needing them and then they completely crap out and then I have nothing, because I rely on them heavily. So, but
yep.
Was that everything that you had for selling?
Yeah, that's all I've been selling this week.
Yeah, so this was the first week where we did not have the swim meet since we had the last swim meet already. So it was just the farmers market this week. So that one I'm still getting accustomed to and figuring out that clientele a little bit more. And it seems like there's a little bit more interest in keychains and the 3D printed dragons, as well as some of the articulated Pokemon. So I've got, there's this little articulated Charizard that I have that it's a smaller one, so it's a lower price point. That one I only sell for like $5, and that one does pretty well. So like in that like $5-ish and less category, that's probably one of the ones that sells a little bit more often. I have some other like generic things, but I have it's an articulated Charizard that's bigger. That was the one, I think we briefly talked about it last show, where it takes 20 hours to do a pair of them. So that one I priced at $15, and I did actually sell one of those. So I was like, okay, that pricing is about right then if I can still sell one of those and push it through. So I did actually do a Dark Charizard print recently that's like black and blue, so that one's going to be a fun, interesting one. I'll see if that one garners any attention. And then I think I only sold like one Pokemon card, which was kind of surprising. And then I think it was mostly dragons then, which I typically price about $10 because I can fit 2 of those on a plate and get those done in about 8-ish hours. So those ones do pretty well for me.
I have a product idea for you for that market. So because you are Midwest and rural area, lots of trucks, this is a product that I use, and I have a 3D printed insert that goes into my trailer hitch.
Hitch covers.
It's a hitch cover, and mine is a Sasquatch,
right.
Of course, right? But I know it's something that's really popular, and the funny thing is at least on Etsy, there's not a lot of people selling them. I did some searching to find that Sasquatch one again, because there was a guy locally who I bought it from, and he's since gone out of business. So I was trying to find a replacement, and I finally found one today, or a couple of days ago, so I ordered it, so I'm waiting for it to arrive. But apparently somebody really liked it because they ripped it off the back of my truck, which is why I had to buy another one.
Because those just slide onto the square tube steel, is that right? Or is
they
that
slide inside, so it goes the standard 2-inch square tube, and it slides in, and then you just put the pin through.
Okay, that was what I was going to ask. I couldn't remember because I don't pull anything on a trailer ever, so I don't deal with hitches. And my wife, when they pull their horse trailer, it's a gooseneck, so it just attaches to the ball that's in the large pickup in the center of the bed, so we don't deal with hitches that much. So, because I didn't know if it was going to be one of those like spring-loaded like friction things, but yeah, that makes sense. Because I need to switch over to a different type of filament, because for the toys and things, PLA is just fine, but for something that's going to be outdoors all the time, I'd need to probably switch over. I don't know if PET G would be good enough for something like that.
So it is. That's the one I used, and the one I had on my truck before somebody stole it, I've had for about 4 years now. Didn't weather, and I mean, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so we go from hot to cold to wet all the time, and so
how hot is hot?
Fine. Like 105 at top out.
Okay. Yeah, that should be fine then, because I've been on the fence about certain like outdoor products where I'm like, I don't know if PET G is going to be good enough, or if I really need to go up to ASA, which ASA is like the next step up that's like UV stable and everything. And that one, if I remember right, that one has some nasty vapors that come off of it, if I remember correctly. So that's one where I've been waffling back and forth on what I want to try for that, because there's actually a it's a file that basically turns a bog bag, which you're familiar with those? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for those who are not familiar with a bog bag, it's basically like a rectangular bag that has holes in the side. So it's basically like a purse, but like they converted it from what Crocs are like in terms of like texture and having holes in it. So that's, and so what I found was it's a file that is a topper for that. So it has, it basically, like you think like the old school picnic baskets where they've got the little like flip up lid. It's basically the same thing, but they also have inserts in there where that flip up piece also includes, so when it's closed, it has like cup holder indentations on it, and other things to like hold your stuff on top of those bog bags. So I've been interested in doing those because my wife has one and my mother-in-law has one. So I was like, something like that I can't do in PLA because that's going to be outside. Like I could do a example one to like test out to see if we actually like it. But in terms of like one that I would actually use, that's definitely something that I would at minimum want to have PET G filament to actually do. So I might need to start diving into PET G here soon, because I've been able to ride on PLA for long enough. But yeah, I was actually going to ask you for some other ideas as well, because I've been trying to think of good lasering projects to do that are just engraving things. Because maybe
my number one seller right now is a cheese knife set from Temu. I pick up a 6-knife cheese knife set. Wooden handles, really nice. It comes in a black case with black foam insert. Again, $5 for the set. I do a little leaf or a mushroom or a little something lasered on each of the handles and on each side. So it takes, 15 minutes per set to do. And then I resell them for $30 a set.
Okay, so the full set has already been made. It's just the laser engraving that you're doing on those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I hate being that guy that, buy something and just, you're not making it, you're just lasering it. But one, cheese knives, I've made them. They suck to make. I don't want to make them. And I don't do metal, so I don't want to have to just buy the insert and then make my handles and stuff. So it's just not worth it to me. But especially out here, like cheese knives, because of charcuterie boards and, wine and everything like that, it's just a big market out here. But that's been my number one seller right now off of just like simple laser projects that the bookmarks and wooden bookmarks. And right now I'm doing all those wooden notebooks. And so I think I've done a couple of test ones. I haven't sold them in a market yet, but the ones I've done in test, I've had some really, really good feedback with. So I have a feeling it's going to do it really well. So
On those bookmarks, are those ones that you've made out of material from you, or did you buy like a bulk set to just laser?
I made it out of material I have. So like actually about a couple of years ago, I picked up a guy was selling a 4x4 that it was an alder 4x4, but it had gotten wet and spalted. And so it was this gorgeous alder 4x4 that had this really cool fungus spalting in it. So I've just been slowly chopping that up in 7.5-inch increments, and then from there you slice the 4x4 in half, and then once you've done some sanding stuff, and then I just run it through the bandsaw to resaw it, and so I just take slices of that, what ends up being an 1.75-inch wide chunk, and yeah, those become my my bookmarks. And then I also do other wood too, but that's great because it's really pretty with the spalting and everything in it.
What kind of thickness do you typically do on those bookmarks, and what do you do to sand the other side clean with the, because you probably have some saw marks on the one side that you need to get rid of?
Yes. So my final thickness gets down to whatever you want to say is between a 1/16 and an eighth. Whatever that would be. Yeah, 3/32. There you go. So that my final thickness is right about there. I run them. I get them down to that thickness. So they come out about, when I resaw them on the bandsaw, I resaw them to an eighth. So yeah. So then there's those marks on each side, and then I just run that through the drum sander.
Okay, so use the drum sander on that one, because that's what I was going to ask. Because I was like, I don't know, because what grit do you run the drum sander on those?
240, so that it's a finished.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because I've got.
Then I don't have to do any hand sanding other than just breaking the edges.
Yeah, because I've got 120 in my drum sander right now, and I've thought about swapping it over, but I just wasn't sure. But I haven't used the drum sander for a project, and I haven't had a need for it. So maybe I should swap the sandpaper to, because I think I might just have 220. I don't know if I have anything above 220 for the drum sander, but that'll probably be close enough. And it's an oscillating sander as well. Because one thing that I did a while ago with a bunch of color samples that I did with various scrap pieces is I did the same route that you did. The only exception was that I ran the piece, like after I cut it, I ran it on the jointer to get a clean face, and then I would run it through so I had only one side that had saw marks on it. And then I just clamped my sander upside down and then just pressed it by hand to sand it that way. And those were just color samples of like different species of woods that I then finished. So they were made to be kind of like the equivalent of paint swatches. So those ones I wasn't paying attention like super closely to thickness. It was like thick enough that like it was all right, but not, because I got a few of them that were a little bit thin that would warp if they were sitting in the car for a little while. So those were probably like sub 1/16 of an inch pieces, and some of these were like highly figured pieces as well. So that was probably also part of it, where there was just no consistent grain pattern. So yeah, I might have to do some of those.
When I started making bookmarks, I did everything by hand, and I gotta tell you that drum sander has the bookmarks have paid for that drum sander a dozen times over at this point by just how much faster I can batch out bookmarks by just running it through once on each side at 240, and it's good.
Yeah. Do you, when you're running through on your second side, are you just lowering the drum sander a hair, or do you run it through at the same height?
No, I lower it. I lower it so it takes off the entire saw blade marks. Yeah.
Oh, I was talking on the... so you did the saw blade side up towards the drum sander first on one pass, and then on the second pass, you're flipping it over and then dropping the drum
most
sander
of
down.
most of those pieces have saw blade marks on both sides because
right.
That block is running through the bandsaw, and so as soon as I run it through at once, it's got a saw blade. I run it through again, it's got a saw blade on both sides now. So yeah, it'll have marks on both sides.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll have to see. I'll have to play around with the drum sander and see. I'm guessing it's probably not worth it to do. Well, I'm trying to debate if it's worth it to like joint the one face on one of those boards to get the like smooth face on one side. It probably depends on how thick your board is that you're cutting off of. Because if it's really, really thick and you got a lot of passes, those errors can kind of start piling up on those little pieces of material that's left behind from the saw blade. But yeah, I'll have to dive into that a little bit more. How many of those do you carry around, those blanks for at shows?
So I have 2 stands that fit 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 different bookmarks in each stand. So that's 24 different styles of bookmarks. So either different wood type or different logo or something like that. And then of each type, the stand can fit 15.
Okay.
So 15 times 24.
And when you say
Whatever
different type, are you talking a different species of wood?
Either like species of wood or same species of wood with a different logo on it. So like, a Pokemon on one and another one that says wine books my weekend, something like that. So just different designs.
Oh, you're not lasering them on site. I had it on my head that you were lasering on site. Okay. Yeah, you're lasering ahead of time to have them there. Gotcha.
Yeah, because then I finish them all with a spray lacquer finish so that they're sealed and there's nothing that can transfer to the paper. So that's why I do the lasering ahead of time.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that gives me some stuff to think about because I took that picture that I laser engraved of the house on there, and I've had that at my booth once. I forgot it the last time that I was here this past week to put it there, but I've been trying to think of things that I can add that are not like super labor intensive, that are like smaller items that I can start backfilling into the booth itself, because they're like, as you know, adding a new product line is a whole different workflow that you're adding in, and that can be a lot of work on the back end. So I'm trying not to like overextend the woodworking side of things, because right now adding a different 3D print model is like push click maybe a different type of filament, and that's all that it is. So it's pretty easy for me to experiment with that one. So that's why I haven't done quite as much on the woodworking side, because I can do a whole plate of a certain design on the 3D printing side that goes while I'm doing other stuff. It doesn't require any additional attention on my part beyond starting it and maybe tweaking a few things on the file. So, but I'm kind of at that stage now where I've sold enough that I kind of understand the ones that are like things that I need to just print and have, and I'm ready to like just a few things here and there each week to just tack on and do a little bit more, because I don't think I do get ahead of myself sometimes, where it's like I want to do everything and it needs to be perfect right away, and it's like, no, it's okay to not have quite everything and just progress and add a little bit more, especially since this is a weekly thing that there's not a whole lot of pressure in terms of it wasn't a high fee to get in there, and I've already made my money back on that, so it's not like I'm struggling to make money back on the entry fees on this show. So anyway, that's a long tangent that we went down, but that gives me some things to think about and do this next week.
Yeah. So this week, I've had a couple of things I've been watching I wanted to shout out. So first of all, Malcolm over at Bossa Nova Woodworks, he started selling his maker name tags, and I should have thought about this and had it with me, but it's downstairs in my show bag. But I have one that I had been testing out for him, but he started selling these. They're super cool. So think of that standard hello, my name is red name tag that you get every show you go to, and you have to write on black marker your name.
Mm-hmm.
So he 3D printed that, but with your name printed on it. So if you order it from him, he'll put your name on it and your social handle. So it's a 3D printed one. It's got some really nice texture. But what's cool about this is it's got two really cool features. One, he insets the magnets inside the 3D print while it's printing. So there's magnets on the back of it, and then he has another two pieces, one that goes on the inside of your shirt and then one on the outside. So those two clip together. So you've got a single piece then holding your shirt, and then you put your name tag and it clips to that piece using the magnets. So you can easily take it on and off. And the reason why is then your name tag has two NFC chips in it. So if somebody's like, hey, what's your social media? Cool, give me your phone. And you tap your name tag to their phone, and up pops your link of choice using the NFC tag. So it's a really cool product. I think it's going to work really well for makers and for people who are at fairs who want to help get you a link or a sign up page or something like that. So make sure you check it out. I've been using it for a while. Absolutely love it. I'm going to bring it with me to Vegas. So I'm going to wear that around so I can just anybody who asks for my contact info, I can just tap it and it'll load my contact info onto their phone. So I wanted to tag Malcolm.
And
Be Free
one clarification
ahead.
there is that because the magnets are clipping on and then the name tag actually clips onto that set of magnets, when you pull it off, those stay together and they don't slip down your shirt, because your traditional one, if you were to take it off, the backside would just slide down and fall out of your shirt, whereas this one, it clamps with the magnets onto the shirt. And so when you take off the name tag, those stay there. So when you go to put it back on your shirt, those magnets are still in the same spot. Because I've seen them he had them at the Midwest Maker Meetup, so I got to see them up front and personal, and saw how they worked and everything. So that's my experience with them.
Yeah, they're really cool. They're a very well thought out design. I hope it does really well for them because it's a great product. I also wanted to shout out Be Free Woodworking. Posted an amazing table. So this table was made from plywood, and it was stained to look like walnut or a dark wood. But they cut the plywood out in layers and then stacked each layer on top of each other to create this, what looks like it's a desk on top and on the sides like normal, but on the inside it looks like a cave. And so it's got basically stalactites hanging down and all the texture that looks like a cave basically. And if you're watching our YouTube channel, you'll see that on your screen right now. It's a really cool table. I thought they did a great job using the layers in different cuts to stack on, and just again using plywood, so it's just an easy material to do. But then the stacking on top of each other was awesome. I wanted to shout out Hulsdine Design Co. I can't speak today. Created a awesome Holst Design. Holst Design Co. created this awesome scrapwood trophy for the father-son cornhole championship that they were doing in their backyard. But what's really cool about these are he took a bunch of scrap wood, stacked them on top of each other, turned the base, turned the top, but in the middle carved all the chunks of wood to look like bean bags stacked on top of each other. And it looks like it looks like bean bags, but to me it looks like little pillows of wood stacked on top. They look so good.
I did actually see that one.
it's amazing carving. I'm super jealous of that technology, but that skill. Wanted to shout out Justin at Scroll Saw Scribbler. Yay for Pokemon for us. Created this really cool scroll saw Pokemon wall art piece. It's a scroll saw of Charmeleon, and then the smoke from the Charmeleon tail is billowing up and then becomes a big Charizard flying out of like Wingay or something like a Blackwood. It looks so good. I think, Justin, if you're listening, you need to get yourself a store online. I couldn't find a store at least, so put a link to it if you can, because I would buy that. And he's also done these amazing comic strips of. I'm gonna blank on the name now. What's the little kid and his tiger?
Calvin and Hobbes. No.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes.
Is it Calvin and Hobbes?
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes is it.
Sean Hobbes is the Fast and Furious one that I just wanted to make sure I wasn't confusing those two. So Sean Hobbes is the Fast and Furious. Calvin and Hobbes is the little
is the cartoon.
Kid. Yeah.
Yeah, which is my favorite cartoon strip growing up, and so I really like his design. So Justin, get yourself a store, and I'll be buying. And then finally, over on YouTube, Charlie from Charlie Pickering Design, he released a video a couple days ago on making some meat claws on your CNC. So think of those barbecue meat claws where you shred up chicken and pork, or play Wolverine, whichever you want to do.
I'm not going to kink shame you.
Yeah, so the video was great, super funny. I love, by the way, that Charlie keeps his mistakes in. So I guess his mic died the day he was filming, and so halfway through the video, he's like, outfit change, my mic died, so I have to reshoot this and like stuff like that. So it's great. I love creators that keep putting that stuff in. But overall, it's a great project. Super easy design, easy to make on your CNC. So it's something that I've actually wanted to make for a while, but I haven't just gotten around to it. So I'm like, well, now I'm gonna make his design because I don't have to make one now. So yeah. But yeah, that's who I wanted to shout out this week. What about you?
All right. So the ones that I have, first one is Keith at Rage and Bone Brown. So he made. I'm
sorry, what?
Rage and Bone Brown.
Okay,
at least I think that's what
you
it
said.
is. Or Rage and then N and then Bone and then Brown. I don't know. Anyway, so he's in the UK and he made this double-decker bus out of wood for his 2-year-old son because his son loves buses, apparently. So it was pretty cool because so he didn't paint it, he kept it. I'm not sure if he used walnut on this or if he used a like oak and stained it or something like that. I didn't look that closely, but it was kind of a dark brown color. So it was just like a fun project that just looked awesome. And especially when it's for your kids and it's for something that they enjoy, it's just a fun little project. So I thought that was a great one that I saw when I was scrolling on Instagram. The next one that I have is Small Project Central. So what they did was they needed some bench cookies, which you've got the Rockler version of bench cookies where it's like the plastic in the middle and then it's got like the foam on the top and the bottom. Those ones actually have threaded inserts for like other accessories and that you can do for like dog holes and things. But what he did was he just 3D printed the plastic disc and then he just threw on some foam on the top and the bottom and he's got bench cookies. So like it's not the same as the Rockler ones where you don't have the like threaded inserts, but honestly I haven't used the threaded inserts, so I was like, oh, if I need more bench cookies I can just 3D print a disc and then throw on some foam and I'll be like good to go, because that's really more or less that's what the bench cookie has. So it's like, yeah, if I need some more bench cookies I can just do that. So
well, I bet you there's a way to design that insert as well, the 3D
yeah print. I mean It's extra time though with assembly, and it's just like, you know what, and it looked like an ice cream sandwich because he printed it white and the outside foam rubber was like the blackish color. So, you know, bonus points for looking like an ice cream sandwich or like a triple stuffed Oreo or whatever. By the way, double stuffed Oreos are the only way to go. You can't change my mind. No. Those are the best. Also, I'm a monster, and I throw the cookie. You're not going to change your mind because you're right. Exactly. And I don't dip my Oreos. I just throw my Oreo in my mouth, take a swig of milk, and then just eat them all together. I'm just too impatient. I'm too impatient to wait for it to get soaked in the milk. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to throw it in.
And now the great debate is, do you hold the cookie with 2 fingers and like dip it, and then you just wait? Like, that's what I do, and then I end up with 2 fingers that are, like, milk-sogged because I've been holding the cookie in the milk.
I just don't think it's sanitary.
Well, I'm the one drinking the milk.
Yeah, but... Well, I guess if you're using your fingers to get the food, it's kind of a moot point.
Right.
Dang it, I just debated myself out of that one. Dang it. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's the Oreo dunking things that you can use, but that just feels excessive. So that's why I just...
Can we agree, though, at least that Oreos and peanut butter don't go together?
I think so, yeah. I think so, yeah.
Okay, good.
We've also done the chocolate covered Oreos before, and those are pretty good.
I've had a deep fried Oreo before.
I have not done deep fried Oreos.
I can't recommend it. There are just some things that it's like, did we what's the Jurassic part? Did we ever wonder if we should? We were so busy, we were thinking if we could.
Yeah, like when you get like the deep fried butter stick. I don't really jump on that trend of deep fried random stuff.
No.
But anyway, bench cookies. They're yummy. And then the last one that I've got is Wendy at Geeky Boutique. So she has been doing a... What?
I love that name.
Yes. So she's been doing a... she's called it a 7 weeks, 7 geeks. I don't know if you would call it a challenge or a series, where she's been doing some piece of art each week. And this week, which I think is it week 4 or 5 now, one of the two, something like that. She has them saved on her stories as one of those like pinned story group file things. So this week, what she did was it's like this tri-frame, and she, I believe she painted a couple of different scenes. One of them was like a bunch of different characters from Gravity Falls, and then the 2 other ones were like kind of iconic images from that series. And I loved watching Gravity Falls, by the way. So I enjoyed that one very much, the paintings of those. So good job on those paintings. And also doing a challenge that is pushing yourself to come up with something new each week. That's a no easy feat to try and come up with different things on such a quick schedule. So kudos on that. And that rounds out what I've been watching.
Summarize it in one word.
So this week's main topic is carving. So hand versus power versus anything with a carving tool. Alex, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one because I don't have a ton of experience with carving. So I'll jump in here and there with the little carving I've done. But I'm going to let you take the lead on this one.
Okay. And I think maybe for clarification, we're talking anything beyond CNC carves, because those ones I think are encapsulated within doing the CNC, especially if like the 4th axis where you're doing like the 3D like rotary carve. And I think those are they're their own particular beast.
Yeah, we're talking like carving a bird by hand, or doing an inlay by hand, or using a Kutzall with an angle grinder, that kind of carving.
Right. Yeah, so I think where I'm going to start on this one is with the work holding, because that will be something that whether you're doing hand carving or power carving, is something that you need. Like, you've got to hold on to your piece of material regardless of what it is that is actually cutting your material. So things that I use for work holding, so I have a Moxon vise. It's one by Benchcrafted, which is a very simple vise that is basically just 2 boards, and you've got 2 threaded rods, and you just crank the wheel down on, and it just presses the whole thing against the other side of the clamp face. So you can get a really nice wide clamping surface with those. Mine is like, the threaded rods are like 24 inches apart, so you can get a full panel in there very, very easily. So that's an easy way to hold pretty big stuff. You can hold things that are not flat with it because you can adjust with those threaded rods. You know, I actually got a set of springs that go in there, so it spring loads the surface so that it presses up against the nuts that are on the outside with the handles. And so I'll clamp stuff that's like, if it can fit in there, because the depth of that is like, I think I can do like maybe 2.5 inches thick material on there. And then once I start getting into like thicker or like more oblong shaped stuff, one thing that I'll use is there's this clamp by Grizzly. I think it's technically called the Carver's Vise, and the really nice thing about it is that it has a threaded rod that goes through the bottom that you can, if you've got dog holes in your workbench, you can just slide it through there, and then there's basically a wing nut on the other side that you can use to clamp it to your workbench. There's also 3 legs on it, I believe, that have spots for like that you can just screw it into your workbench if you just want to screw it in there and have it solid. And the nice thing about this carving vise is that one of the jaws swivels, so you can get a nice clamping surface on whatever it is that you're holding. And the depth of the clamp, I think, is like 6 or 7 inches, I think, off the top of my head. So you can clamp some pretty deep stuff. The faces of those vices aren't like super big. They're like maybe 3 inches square surface area, roughly. So that'll hold some good stuff, especially if you're doing, spoons or spatulas, other things of that nature. It'll do well with those. The Moxon vise will do well with those as well because it's got a similar, it can handle stuff that's thinner stock material like that. But the carving vise, the nice thing is you can rotate it around a little bit to get different orientations. If you don't have either of those vices, a simple thing that you can do is just clamp it onto the workbench with a quick release vise. Or if you've got I've carved stuff where I've just clamped it to one of those folding tables, like those plastic ones that like fold up and, you put away. Like, I'll just clamp something to that and that'll work just fine. I gotta reclamp it and move it around. It's a little bit tedious, but it works. But as long as you're clamping it down and able to hold it well, and keep it from like vibrating around as you are cutting, you're gonna get a much cleaner surface as a result. And I've also, a couple of times, I've actually clamped things to the to my bandsaw, because it's got a small table that's a cast iron surface that's pretty sturdy. I don't have a nice big table saw that I can clamp stuff to, but you may not want to clamp stuff to your table saw. But I clamped to my bandsaw table and got good results with that too. So anything that's like heavy is going to definitely help with keeping it nice and secure. So moving on from work holding, if you're like me,
I will jump in there and say another thing that you didn't kind of bring up that you can do wood holding for carving is a vacuum solution. Festool makes one, and I was trying to find the one that Blacktail Studio
Festool's
uses.
is discontinued though.
Oh, it is discontinued. Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's called the Vaxis, if I remember, like vac as in vacuum and then SYS as in like sustainer or whatever. So I think I've seen the ads for them where I think they're like, it's for the like extra seals or like accessory parts, but they don't actually sell the unit itself, which made me sad.
Oh, interesting. And I was trying to find it real quick on Blacktail Studio, but I couldn't find it. But he demos quite often when he does his power carving. It's a vise that's on the side of his table that is a vacuum system that can rotate up to 90 degrees, which is really nice. But it's a circular vacuum head that he clumps the piece of wood to, and then it is really nice pressure. I was also looking at Rockler has these little vacuum, they call them vacuum pods, that are like 6-inch squares that you can screw onto your work table and use as well as a vacuum holding down system. So that is another option for a vacuum system.
Right, yeah. And whatever you go with for your work holding, getting it at a comfortable height is going to be very, very helpful, because if it's super low and you're like constantly bending over as you're working, you're going to hurt your back. So making sure that it's at a nice, helpful... Yep. Yeah, it's definitely good to have it at a higher, nice, not elevation, but work height, so that you can reach it very, very easily.
It's also a safety thing, too, because you don't want to get overly tired and then have it slip out of your hand because you're trying to reach at an awkward angle or something like that. So it is just that part of that protection for you. Yeah,
and then one thing that a lot of people will do in this space, and I don't consider myself very artistic, but one thing that you can do to really help yourself as you're carving stuff, especially if you're new to it, is just drawing on pencil lines of where you want to carve, even if it's just for a curve and not for like a fancy, like, you don't have to be like carving a deer out of it or something like that. You can, if you're just doing something that's like simple with a couple of curves, you can draw curves on a couple of different faces. So you can have, so if you're starting off with say you're starting off with a block of wood, kind of like this, where it's like, you know, like a 1x2 or a 2x2, and you're carving it into, you know, a spatula or stirring stick of some kind, and you want more ergonomic shapes, just drawing lines on there of what it looks like from the top view and then what it looks like from the side view. So as you cut those lines, you are getting closer to that line. And it's essentially like coloring within the lines, and just following and getting close to it. Like when you are following a line and you're cutting with scissors is a similar scenario. It becomes very straightforward when it's just, I just got to go to the line and follow that curve. And you can use, you know, different things to lay that out, whether it's rulers or if you want to get fancy with like one of those French curves, those little like plastic pieces that you can trace out that shape. A lot of this stuff, it doesn't have to be super fancy. You don't have to have a big background in art to get cool shapes and, you know, different profiles. And
yeah, absolutely. A good example of that is BM Sculptures or Blake McFarland on YouTube. If you want to see a good example of drawing those lines, he does very large sculptures. He's pretty famous for spending 500 hours on this giant wooden T-Rex head out of old redwood burl. But he just starts by drawing it on the big block and then starts carving with a chainsaw and other things. But if you're looking for good examples, every project he starts with drawing it on the block of wood. So a good example.
Yeah, and once you get those layout lines on there, it becomes, at least to me, it becomes a question when you're going between power and hand carving of like, how much material do I need to take off? Like, how many of these am I making? Am I doing it for fun? Am I doing it for profit? And sometimes that guides which tool that I will use. So, you know, you can think of, I can't remember who coined the phrase of doing coarse, medium, and fine work. But if you're doing something you want a tool that can do a coarse material removal. So say, for example, if you've got like a 1x2 and you're like cutting out a spatula, your first step might actually just be using a bandsaw to cut relatively close to that line. So then you don't have to carve to that line if speed is of the essence. And then maybe you come in with a more medium tool that gets you closer to that line, and then you end up with a fine tool like sandpaper or like a rasp to get you to the final finish that you want. But when it comes to the hand versus power tools, you don't necessarily like. I do say speed a little bit on there, but you can still get some good material removal with hand tools, depending on which one you're actually using. So if you use, something like a Sloyd knife, which is what your typical like carving knife is, it kind of looks like a paring knife in your kitchen. And you can also get a probably one of my more favorite ones is actually a spokeshave, which is basically like a potato peeler, but for wood. And instead of just having like a handle on one side, it has a handle on both sides. So if that workpiece is held down nice and tight and it's just like a potato peeler, you get the same thickness taken off, and it's a lot of fun. So I have a few different spokeshaves. You've got like a flat bottom, and then you can have round bottom ones for like doing inside curves or doing like outside curves. But generally I'm doing the flat bottom one. And that one's a lot of fun because you just get to make shavings and it's a good time. And it's something that you can do with your kids as well, because it's a pretty basic operation where as long as it's got contact on the workpiece, it's going to take shavings off. So it's going to be pretty darn quick, because when you're taking off shavings, you're looking at something that is thicker than probably a piece of paper that you're taking off, which is going to be faster than, sandpaper when it comes to material removal. So if you've already like kind of cut close to your line with like a saw or something like that, you can start following your line with that spoke shave and get a decent surface finish on it. If your spoke shave blade is nice and sharp. I honestly prefer Veritas hand tools because they're like very good quality, very sharp out of the box, and they're ready to go and they're good to go. They are a little bit more of a premium price, but I really enjoy using them. I've got a couple of other hand tools from Veritas that I love using, and I also love the color of the handles. It's that nice rich brown color that I like.
I only have a few traditional hand tools, and I do have a spoke shave from Veritas, along with, and then from another company, I have a little micro hand plane for chamfers and small edges. But I do like Veritas. They're a good name.
Yeah, and depending on other carving stuff that you like to do, if you're carving by hand, you can go as far as a hatchet. So I actually have a hatchet from Jason Lonan is the name of the gentleman that has the carving hatchet or carving axe, or whatever you want to call it. And you can get, if you don't want to use a bandsaw to get close to your edge, you can make pretty quick work of a piece of wood with a carving hatchet that's smaller, a nice quality one. I'm not talking about something that is just like an off the shelf from the hardware store hatchet or axe, because that's way, way different. These are made to be used for quick fine motions, and all you got to do is, if you're like holding say like a 1x2 like I have in front of me on the screen, and it's held down on a surface or something nice and sturdy, if you do a couple of cuts on the side at like a 45-degree angle downward, and you get a couple of notches in there, you cut into the fibers of the wood, and then you go down the length, and you basically just shave off all of those little notches to get closer to your line. And I've done that for like carving out spoons before, and it's a lot of fun. And you know, these carving axes by Jason Lonen are not cheap, because they are very, very well made, very sharp right out of the box, and they're a lot of fun. So if you do want to do some hand carving and go from very, very rough, that's a good place to start. If you just don't want to skip and go to the bandsaw, that's a very fun way to do it. And what I've done with that one is I just have a log that's about 3 or 4 feet tall that I just set that piece on, and I kind of hold it on the top, and then I just kind of cut away with the hatchet to get to that rough surface finish before I start going to, you know, something like the spokeshave and removing material that way. And one thing that I've occasionally used with the spokeshave is I have a shave horse, which is, for those who are not aware, it looks kind of like a rowing machine, but there's a pedal on the bottom that you press, and it clamps on the top side of it and holds your workpiece. So it holds it as you press it down, and then you can pull the spokeshave towards you, kind of like a rowing action, and you start just pulling off those shavings. But if you want to go with something a little bit more coarse, you can also use a draw knife, which is just a long, flat blade with handles on each end. It's a very simple tool, but a lot of fun to shave off even more material than the spokeshave. And that will get you some quick material removal very quickly, especially if you're doing like chair legs or other types of legs where you are needing to get to a certain profile before you start carving in those smaller features. Same thing with if you're doing spoons or spatulas or other things, you can use that spokeshave to start slicing in. So it's a little bit, not to say that the carving axe isn't a fine tool, but I find that the spokeshave is a little bit easier to control right out of the box, because you can have because you've got a flat back on one side, and then you've got the single bevel on the other side. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll flip it over so that flat side is facing upwards towards me, and then you can kind of angle how deep of a cut that you actually want, so that if you're just taking off a little bit or more. And you can get vintage draw knives for pretty darn cheap on Facebook Marketplace, and then if you just sharpen them on one side, they're pretty straightforward to get to nice and sharp. So if you want to get in very easily, that's a quick way to do it. But I do also have a draw knife that is from Jason Lonen, and then I have a smaller I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's a draw knife made by Veritas, and it's a little bit shorter and smaller, because most of your draw knives are about, that you'll find, are around that like 8 or 10 inches long, that single long blade, whereas the one that I have is that is from Veritas is maybe like 4 or 5 inches long, so it's a little bit finer of a spokeshave. And then for carving those ones, there's a couple different options that you can go from those, because if you get down to the spokeshave and you're pretty good with the spokeshave, you can get a pretty nice clean surface. You'll get a little bit of facets on there, or you'll get some like flat surfaces. So depending on if you want that look to it or not, that aesthetic, you can go to sandpaper if you want, or you can go another route, which is rasps. And there is a big difference between hand-stitched rasps and machined rasps. So the difference there is that with a machined rasp, the the teeth in those are going to be exactly in the same spot every single time as the machine manufactures those, whatever kind of machine that they use to manufacture those. Whereas with a hand-stitched rasp, because someone put in each of those teeth and tacked those in, they're a little bit more random, so you get more of a clean motion because of the randomness of it. So it's closer to sandpaper and a lot smoother. So one place that you can get hand-stitched rasped is, it's a place called, the website is Tools for Working Wood, and there are several different rasps that you can get from there. I have several of them, and it's probably close to, they have a coarse and then they have a fine tooth count. I think it's like 25 TPI or something like that is what they technically call it. But you get close to, like, I'd probably equivocate it to, I don't know, maybe like 180 grit, roughly, surface finish. So you can get a pretty good surface finish with those hand-stitched rasps, and they are a joy to use. They are so much fun because you get to, like, shape those handles. I don't say handles, I mean your workpiece. And because I've done a vase before where I just drilled a hole for the top of the vase, and then I just kind of like shaped with the rasp the rest of it. And when you're following those organic shapes and you're just kind of removing material, it's just so much fun to do because it's such a smooth motion because of that, it being hand stitched. So it's just so much smoother, whereas if you've got a machined rasp, you're much more likely to have it like catch on something as you're trying to like make that smooth motion, and you end up with a little bit rougher of a surface even though it has a similar TPI as the hand stitched one. So there is a big difference on those. It is a different, you know, it's a lot more expensive to go with a hand stitched rasp, but if you are going to be doing some hand carving and you're just looking to enjoy that time, that's a really great way to accomplish that. And then, of course, you know, whether or not you consider using just a sheet of sandpaper with your hand is, you know, part of the hand carving process. That's another way you can get it to that final finish, to whatever surface finish that you actually want. If you don't want that like faceted look of spokeshaves or any of those other, you know, single blade style of tools. And then when it comes to power carving, a lot of the power carving that I do is for live edges on workpieces. So a lot of times if I need to either simulate a live edge or just contour and smooth over an existing live edge, typically that's what I'll use power carving for. And what I'll use is it's Kutzall Extreme is the name of the disc that I use, and it just attaches to an angle grinder. And that thing will hog off a lot of material. And especially if you're just doing something that is, you know, simulating the live edge and you kind of are just getting flat or slightly curved surfaces, it works just fine because they're about, I want to say 6 inches in diameter. And one consideration that you'll need to make is how much sawdust you're going to be flinging with this thing. Because if you're doing more of the hand carving stuff, you're more likely to get shavings in those scenarios. If you're using like the rasp, you'll get a little bit of sawdust out of that. But if you're using that Kutzall Extreme power carving disc, you're gonna have a lot of sawdust getting everywhere. And when I've got
and
that,
this is the most of, I was gonna say this is the mostly the carving I've done is with the Kutzall power discs, and yeah, they are beasts. If you want to take off a lot of material, they've got at least I've got 2 of the grits. I've got the extreme, and then I've got the fine for fine finishing as well. But both of them are just beasts at doing what they do. And I love that they don't really dull as long as you're using them on wood. you could just use a brass wire to clean them up after they're done, or an ultrasonic cleaner. But after that, as long as you just use them on wood, they don't really dull, which is really nice too.
Yeah, I just take a torch to it and just burn off the excess.
Yep.
Is what I do.
Yep. I'm always a little afraid of that because I'm worried about tempering it, or worry that aspect if you get it too hot. But so I just use the wire brush.
Yeah, I just touch it with it, just kind of like flash it off, because I'm not just sitting with it on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one, I use that a lot when I'm doing live edge pieces where I need to get it down to the actual sapwood itself. Because sometimes, because a lot of times on those live edge pieces, there's some, if not all of the bark still on there when I have it. And I will use just like a utility chisel and a hammer to just pop off the bark itself. And then sometimes there's a little bit of that, if I remember right, the layer between the bark and the actual sapwood of the tree, I think is that the cambium layer? Something like that. It's this kind of like papery, thin, organic material of the tree, and you want to sand that down because that'll peel over time. So you just want to get rid of it so that you're down to the sapwood. You can leave it on there; it's fine. You just being aware that can delaminate over time is just something to consider. And usually, depending on how much work I've been putting on with that Kutzall Extreme power carving head, if it's a fairly flat live edge, I'll just come in with my sander with a softer pad, because I usually use the 6-inch Rotex, and I just come in and do the sanding with that. But if I've got some contours that have some edges that kind of change direction quickly, like if there's a knot on one side and it kind of like does this little 90-degree thing, kind of juts out a little bit, I'll come in with my 3-inch Rotex, which has a really, really soft pad and gets a majority of those contours, and will sand it down super quick because it's got that gear-driven mode, where it pushes through instead of the random orbit that kind of shakes itself. Because if you're using just a regular random orbit and it's just kind of randomly shaking, it might get stuck on those, whereas the Rotex will just keep on pushing through that to get that nice smooth surface finish that you'll want.
I will say too, if you're talking about other carving, not necessarily for live edge, but for other pieces, I use my 4x3 from Surf Prep with a foam, their foam pads as well, and that works really great when I'm sanding up carved pieces, or especially rounded edges that I've put on things, or if I've done a hand carved table base, something like that. Those are really, it works really well for those, because it molds to all those little contours that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's some other options as well. Like you've kind of got those flap sander style things that you can chuck up into a cordless drill if you want to go that route. I haven't used those like a whole lot.
I've tried. Honestly, I don't think they're great tool. You're not going to get a finished sand on them. And if anything, because the way they're made and the way how fast your drill will spin or not, you'll either get really bad scratch marks from the sanding and uneven, or a lot of the times I find that you get burn marks from it going too fast. So I personally would not recommend those. I don't think there's a good use for those in wood carving and woodworking.
Yeah, because like he said, I've tried them, and the only scenario where I've actually used them is when I have like an interior hole where it's like a knot has gotten pushed out and I'm sanding that inside edge. That's one of the few scenarios where I'll actually use that, if at all. And there's another attachment that I have that it's kind of like a spindle sander, but attaches to the end of the cordless drill, and it actually has a handle on the other side that's like just like an aluminum handle. So it's just like depending on which size diameter you use, there's a couple of different ones, but it's like down to like 1/2 inch and then up to like 1.5 inches or something like that. And that one's okay for those like inside holes where you need to like get some of those inside edges in there when you're doing some of that live edge work where it's, say, like a knot popped out and you're just sanding those inside contours for that, because I've done that a few times, and that's done okay.
And if you have smaller ones, like I have a Dremel that I have an attachment on, that's that exact same attachment for your drill, but Dremel size for those smaller holes. I use a lot of Kutzall and other carving attachments for my Dremel as well when I'm doing small finished carving. So like for my UFOs, I make these little dioramas with the cave for the Sasquatch, and I make some rivers for epoxy and stuff. I carve all of those using a Dremel and the little Kutzall carving, carving bits. So those are a really easy tool to add on, and for those smaller items that you're looking at making.
Yeah, and sometimes with those inside edges, sometimes I'll gravitate towards that hand-stitched rasp and use that for those inside contours. And sometimes that just kind of depends on the size and the shape of what it is that you're working with, if it's a more organic shape or if it's a more geometric, even shape. Because one thing that I found with the Dremel tools is that it can be very easy, especially if they've got the bigger spike from the Kutzall pieces. Sometimes those can dig in a little bit if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of why I generally gravitate towards the little disc-shaped one instead of the ones that are just like, they're more like the end of a pen that kind of spin around. Because if you're getting something that's disc-shaped, it's got a little bit more time. There's more surface area to randomize those teeth a little bit, and I just like the surface finish a little bit better. So that's what I gravitate towards if I'm using something that's like small tools like that. And I used, this was a project from a while ago, but I made a hand carved a piece of walnut to look like a little dog turd for Mark Spagnolo, the Wood Whisperer, because he had an incident in his shop where essentially a passerby used a 5-gallon bucket outside of his shop as a toilet. So I hand carved a piece of walnut to look like poop, and I presented it in a small bucket to resemble that instance. Thank you for the sound effect. And I use the Dremel a lot for that one. So that one again, for the swirl on that one, I drew the lines on that to follow. So that was it was a very interesting project that it was a little bit challenging because you not only had the swirl, but you had to narrow it down to a point to make that nice, crisp, pyramid-looking turd.
Hey, when you gotta go, you gotta go.
Exactly. So, anyway, choosing between all of those pieces, I will say probably the hand tool that I'll use the most, regardless of if it's a project for fun or if it's for commission piece, is if I need that hand stitch rasp, that's generally the one that's gonna like win out in a lot of scenarios where that's like the only tool that really removes a lot of material and leaves behind a pretty good finish. So that's one where personally I like using that tool quite a bit. There's not very many occasions that I use the draw knife or the spokeshave in very often. But it's more of trying to like find an excuse to use it just because it's fun kind of scenario. Because that's something that, you can use the you mentioned using a block plane to break some edges, and you can use the spokeshave to break some edges as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so much fun to do that. Gosh, what else can I say about power carving versus hand carving?
So one thing that you can do as well is if you have the option, either with the gun that you have, or if you have a smaller items with a cabinet, you can use sandblasting to help sand those power carve items as well, to keep those organic shapes. Like we talked about it a lot in our sandblasting episode, which was episode 2. So if you haven't listened to that one, go on back and take a listen if you're interested. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of options to help, especially when it comes to organic shapes, to help getting those edges sanded down. Shaved down is what I was saying, but sanded down.
Yeah, especially if you have those work pieces that are burled and you want to keep that kind of spiky look and keep that original shape. Sandblasting is going to definitely give you a surface finish that is going to help you keep that shape. Because I'll say a lot of times on the live edge pieces that I've done, I've had some of those spots pop up where they're not necessarily burl, but you can tell like a stick was trying to grow at a certain area and it kind of pops out. But a lot of times if I'm just doing a live edge, I'll sand that down flat, just because usually for me it's for like a desk or a table, so you don't want stuff like catching your shirt or whatever at that height. So I just end up making it flat, and it makes kind of a fun grain pattern in there, where you can see where there was something that was trying to protrude out. So I end up either hitting it with that Kutzall Extreme power carving disc and then sand it after the fact. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else on those ones. Oh, really quick, with the sawdust coming off of the power carving, I have, when I've had some projects that I just had to get done, and I had to do it indoors, I just swept stuff up after the fact, and I still have a bunch of sawdust on some shelves from doing a bunch of simulated live edges. But what I should have done on that is I should have gotten one of those dust collection manifold things. It's very similar to like guys that work on lathes, where they have a it's kind of like a rectangular fitting that's, I don't know, maybe like 4 inches by like 10 or 12 inches that's close to it, where it's not going to catch everything, but it'll get a good amount of sawdust that's flinging off of that workpiece. So if you've got a work holding that's holding that, and you put that dust collection manifold close by, or if you have like a downdraft table, that can help you collect some of that sawdust. I have tried a couple of times in desperation to just kind of like throw my dust extractor hose close by, and it barely does anything. So you definitely need the your dust collection from your dust collector instead of a shop vac or a dust extractor, because they're just not going to catch those fast flying particles very easily.
Yeah, and if you can, especially if you're a small maker, do it outside if you're power carving, or open your garage door and do it right at the edge of the garage, and take a box fan and put it right behind you so it's blowing the dust out the door. Is a good thing. My shop is always covered in a layer of dust, and once a year I take my leaf blower and go through the whole shop and blow out all the dust out the front door. But it's pretty bad.
Yeah, and I will still throw on that full face mask, just because my eyes have become so sensitive after having LASIK with sawdust that it's just like I want to have those covered. And it's also just a good thing to have that as well, because if you're power carving with an angle grinder, stuff can happen. Like knots and other chunks can get pulled out by those deep teeth and just fling things really fast. So it's just good to have that eye protection, as well as a respirator on for all of that sawdust that's going everywhere. Especially if you don't have like a true dust collection system and you've just got a fan blowing it, or if you're just outside, it's a good way to keep your eyes and your lungs from enduring a whole bunch of sawdust.
Good news, everyone.
So, Maker News this week, nothing major, just as a reminder, AWFS is coming up in 2 weeks. So if you're going to be in Vegas, make sure to send myself a message. I will be there. Trying to get a Maker meetup scheduled, or at least come say hi. We can grab a beer together. So send me a message if you're interested and you're going to be in town.
Cool. And just another reminder that you can also sponsor the show by going to patreon.com/whatchamakinshow, and you can become a patron for as little as $5 and still be that last person to get that special gift from Mr. Duffey.
Absolutely. And just want to say thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember,
in case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good one.